When you first log Toggle, once you've set up an account, this is what it looks like on your computer. Now, you also have a simpler version of it on your phone, which I can show in a minute. Okay, so this is what it looks like. But first, before you really get into tracking your time, it's useful to think about, what are my goals of writing? How do I write? What are the areas that I write in? What is it that I want to accomplish? Because ultimately, accountability isn't very useful if you're putting a lot of time into things that aren't helping you get to your goals. So the first thing that I did when I got into Toggle is set up an organization system that would help me with my writing and with my goals. So before I started tracking time, I went to the manage section and started setting up my toggle so it would be customized to what I wanted to do. Now, there are all sorts of things you can do. You can add workspaces, so you could create, well, I want a writing workspace and I want one for cleaning so I can track my cleaning. I'm never going to do that, but I probably should. So we're not going to talk about that today. You can also create a team. You can, I believe, have up to 5 people for free. So if more than one person's working on a project, you can track things together. I don't use that functionality either. But what I did to organize my projects and my writing goals is, first I went to manage and I clicked on clients. Now, I've already done this, but you can see, you can type in a new client name and click add. Now, what is a client? For me, what I looked at is, my clients are my big picture projects. These are my bigger picture goals, and then there will be lots of sub things under those goals. But I want to look at, if I want to look back at the end of the year or at the end of the month and say, what are the big picture things that all relate under this umbrella? These are my big umbrellas. So you can see the umbrellas or the clients that I have set up for this year. So contract work, I do some writing or editing that I'm paid for, so that goes under here. Development, this I will count things like anything that's developing my writing or helping me develop the writing of others. So whether I'm listening to a writing podcast like Writing Excuses, going to writing group, critiquing someone's work, preparing something for critique, this is all going to fit under development for me. That's that umbrella. Marketing, anything I might do to promote my own writing, or I count my blog and my website as part of this, as my marketing efforts. This is my current novel project, which is Mary Bennett, and she's my main character. And so there's lots of things that I'm doing with this, whether it's research or drafting, but that's my big umbrella. Personal writing. To me, this is important to count not just certain types of writing. To say, my personal writing, my journal writing, I don't want to fall behind on that or not count that as important. So I put that as its own client. I also write short stories, so I put short stories down. Submissions, that takes up a lot of time when you start submitting things, whether it's a novel or short stories, so I give that its own category. And I'm also working on helping out putting together an anthology right now with some other writers, and so that becomes its own category. And these are my big clients. Now you can retire clients so they're no longer showing up, but for now, this is what I'm working on. So first I started out with, these are my big picture goals. These are the big picture things that I think will umbrella fit everything that I want to be working on this year. Then I went to create sub projects within these clients. So if you go here, manage, you can click projects. And what I decided is, let me sort this so it becomes more clear, is I decided, okay, what are each of the sub-tasks, these major tasks that will be within each of these clients? So I created these projects and assigned them to clients. But you can see what I've done here. So with this anthology that I'm working on, producing it or helping the big picture happen, it's its own category. And then my individual story within it has its own category. For submissions, I'm submitting short stories. I'm submitting a novel that I started submitting last year. Theoretically, I will start submitting the novel that I'm working on this year, but I'm on a first draft, so it's going to be a while, but it needed its own project category. whether I'm submitting to a conference. And so you can see as it goes through here that I created a lot of sub-projects. So for personal writing, my family letters, and journal writing. For my novel, my first draft, research, outlining, and then other revisions that I'm doing it. And so you can see that I've gone through and I've subdivided, okay, these are what I'm working on. And I can easily go and add new projects as the need arises. The one other thing that I did was you can create tags. I only created one tag, but I like to track my word count. And so an easy way is just to tag a time entry as being related to word count, so I can find it later. But you could tag all sorts of things and use a different approach to categorizing. This is just what works for me. So once you've organized, once you've figured out what is it that I want to accomplish, that's when you can start tracking. That's when you can start using this to hold yourself accountable and to see all that you have accomplished. Because to me, writing is a lot about the time put into it, the effort. If you are the most talented writer, but you don't move forward with it and don't put time into it, you're not going to see the results you want. And we all have times and seasons where we can write more or less. Last year was a lower year for me. I did move. I did have a lot of other things in my life, but I can still look at it and see, okay, I devoted this time for it to writing, and this was worth it. So now we'll go back to the main screen that you get to when you log in, which is the timer. Let's see. I'm going to make this load. Okay. So ultimately it says, what are you working on? So I will sit down and I will say, I'm going to start my writing. And as soon as I press this timer, I am not going to get distracted by Facebook or Twitter. I'm not going to answer my phone unless it's my sister and she needs something. But everyone else is going to have to wait. I'm not going to be interrupted. I'm not going to go off on a research tangent unless I've logged the time as I am researching. Then I'm allowed to do it. So what I'll do is, what are you working on? And I can say, you can either just type in what it is and categorize it later, or you can go and say, okay, well, the folder that I want to do, and you can see, okay, here are your clients. Here are your projects you put within it. So let's say I'm working on my first draft of my novel, which is what I really should be working on right now. So I can type in, you can just leave it at that and press play, which is the start, or you can give more specifics. So let's say I'm writing chapter 7 right now. So I can type that in. I can press play and we'll just start recording. And then I can go do my writing, log it, and ultimately when I am done with my writing session or when I get distracted, I'll go and I'll stop my time. And I can see, okay, how much have I worked today? And I can see what I've worked on today. Okay, I've worked on chapter 7 twice today. You can see the length of time. You can see the other projects I've worked on today. The other nice feature is that you can go in manually and edit these things. If I actually left the timer on for 2 hours after I stopped writing, I can go and change that and fix that just by clicking and editing the time. You can also go and manually add things. Let's say I was at the park and I was writing in my notebook and I didn't log this time. Well, I can go into manual mode and I can add time that I spent writing anytime. So this is kind of the first view where you can see, okay, this is what I was working on today. This is what I did yesterday. This is what I did the day before that. And you can see what you've been working on. There's other neat features. Oh, if I'm working on the same thing I worked on a few days ago, I can just click play down on that and it'll pop it up to the start and start working on it. So that's the timer view. Another view that you can see is the dashboard view, which is another way to see what you've been tracking, what your week looks like, what you're working on. And it creates these nice charts that help you visualize your week, what it looks like, your time, how it's spent, what you've been tracking and doing. My favorite part is actually the reports. And you can do a lot of reports with the free version, which is what I have. Apparently, if you start paying them lots of money, you can do even more reports, but I haven't found a need to do that. So what I can do is I can get a summary report of what I'm working on. And so I can look at the default is this week. and I can see, okay, this week I've worked mostly on the anthology. I can see I've worked 5 hours and 57 minutes on that. I've worked on short story submissions. I've spent 20 minutes. That's how long it took me to submit a short story to a competition. And I've spent 5 minutes on other things, which I can see here was my first draft of my novel. As I said, I should be working on my novel right now. So you can see, okay, what's your project that you've been working on? What's the time entry? You can actually group it also by your client. So if you've been working on lots of parts of a project, you can see this chart might change. This week it didn't change, but often it does. You can also go and look at different reviews. You can actually choose any time frame that you want. I could look at last year. I could look at this year. I could choose 8 random days. I'm going to set it to this year. And I can see how I spent 74 hours writing in January. I've spent 51 hours writing in February. And I can see how, when I look at this bigger picture, it's interesting how this time is spent. 48 hours on the anthology I'm working on. I've spent 44 hours on my novel, including first draft and outlining and research. 16 hours on writing development. So between critique group and critiquing others and listening to podcasts and learning about writing. 9.5 hours on personal writing. So my journal writing, my family letters. And I can, break this down and, see the subcategories. You can also print these reports, and it comes out with, makes these really nice PDFs that you can save and refer to later. Also, there's a lot of other tools. Let's say I just want to see this year what I've been working on with just my novel that I should be writing. And I can click here and just say, I just want this one client, or you could choose 2 or 3. And then I could do just some projects, or I could do the whole thing. But I'm just going to do, I just want that client, my umbrella of my novel. So I can look and apply that. You'll see that it loads. Okay, I can see my 44 hours. I spent 32 hours working on it in January, 12 hours working on it in February. So I can even see, is this where I want to be spending my time? Is this helping me meet my goals? I'm going to switch this from the client view first to the project view so I can see how my time breaks between the different sorts of tasks. So I can see here that my first draft, and in writing the first draft, I've spent 20 hours so far this year working on that. I've spent 13.5 hours working on research. I've spent 6.5 hours on outlining. And then I've spent 4 hours doing some revisions, mostly for writing group, because I can't submit a first draft to writing group or it would not go very well. And so this really just helps me to set these goals and to meet them. And I think ultimately I always try to go back to some of the principles I've learned in the book, The Power of Habit, of, you try to find the time, you create these cues, you create a process that works for you. And ultimately that's what you have to do with writing and with holding yourself accountable, is choosing what works for you. This is a tool that works well for me, and having accountability to myself, even if it's just to a web program and to these charts that I can create, it works for me. It's fulfilling, it's a reward, and it shows me, yes, I am putting in the time, I am putting in what I can. And some months, as you can see, that is a lot more than others. And there are weeks that are much better than others. But ultimately, as long as you're making progress towards your goals, as long as you can reevaluate, as long as you can figure out where it is you want to go and make sure you're putting the time towards that, then you can be satisfied with what you are doing with your writing.